Welcome to another installment of Test Chamber. I'm Matt Miller. I am joined by Joe Juba.
Hello.
And we are here to talk about a game that I think both of us are pretty stoked to see the final version of.
I think that's fair to say.
One we've been waiting for like almost as long as both of us have worked here.
Yeah, I mean, longer. Wait, no, not quite. Because this game's been in process, started as Final Fantasy Versus 13.
Right.
And we've known about that for maybe around 10 years. We've been here a little over that.
It's pretty crazy how long this game has been in the works, but that's not to say that the game feels antiquated. If anything, it's a really ambitious and surprising shift in the Final Fantasy formula. You've had a lot of experience covering this game over recent months.
Yep. I wrote our cover story earlier this year, and I got to play it for a few hours, but I used to be the person who'd played the most of this game, and now you are the person who's played the most of this game.
Well, we had an opportunity to play an early version that showed off several of the early chapters of the game, and I kind of dove in being pretty fresh with it to offer our last look before hopefully a review here sometime in the coming weeks. And so you'll see my specific impressions in the next issue of Game Informer of the early hours that I got to play. But we want to show off a little bit of what I did play during the time that I was just exploring it for the first time. So let's just dive in. We'll see some of the things we've pulled together from throughout that. I think I was playing for about 12 hours or so. So I think this part here. We're going to be jumping around a lot, but this shows off one of the early kind of big fights that you have in the game.
How early is early? I see that your hit points are not very high.
No, this is really early. This is in the very first chapter or two of the game, and I think you will be able to tell that there's a bunch of stuff that's early, including my own understanding of the battle system. And I'd be interested in your thoughts about this because you played it a bunch over the course of the game's development. It's an unusual battle system, right?
Yeah, it's definitely different. I think for Final Fantasy, I think probably Kingdom Hearts players will probably feel more at home with it than traditional Final Fantasy players.
Yeah, there's a lot of real time stuff here. You're dodging attacks or trying to anyway. It's just kind of interesting change from what we're used to. And often, as you're wandering around, we cut to this here just to show off that there's this whole system about like the day-night cycle and resting that I think is really interesting in this game.
Because that's when you level up, right?
Yeah.
Is that like, it's not like you just get experience and then immediately level up. You like stay at your camp, you cook some food, you like allocate you learn new skills in the evening, right?
And it's also important, you have to go do that eating and sleeping thing so that you don't get exhausted or hungry or whatever. This is kind of this weird thing. I just wanted to be able to show off the fact that like a lot of Final Fantasy games, 15 does a bunch of stuff to give you these weird little side activities that are often very engrossing, time sinks in their own right.
So this is their pinball game, Justice Monsters 5, but this is also available as like a standalone app, right?
That is my understanding, yes. But this was me just kind of going into a diner in the game and going to play some Justice Monsters 5, and I was able to just kind of do this for a long time. We're obviously not going to show the whole thing. People have compared it to pinball for obvious reasons, but it really isn't pinball. It's more of like this weird kind of like slingshotty like arcade game, right?
Is it fun?
It's kind of fun. I think like a lot of things with Final Fantasy games, you don't quite realize the potential depth right out of the gate and what some of the stuff is that you can do with it. Yeah. I did get some in-game rewards as I was playing. Like when I finished, I got like an elixir for my trouble.
All right.
That I could kind of take with me along for the...
Where does it stack up in terms of like, do you like this better or do you like the like card games in Final Fantasy VIII?
Well, I think that might be a different answer for you and I. I know you've gotten really into some of those in the past. Yeah. I kind of like that this is sort of this like action-y arcade thing, which is a little bit more up my alley sometimes than like having to learn this whole other card game system in game.
Gotcha. And now this looks like a leveling system.
Yeah, this is the new Ascension system, which I quite like. You'll note that there's actually different tabs that I'm moving through here, and those are the different kind of categories. You can level up your main character, Noctis, but you can also level up your allies. You can improve your exploration abilities.
So do your allies have like individual technique trees also?
Yeah, well, basically, they have there's a dedicated allies technique tree, and along that tree you can choose among your different allies.
I guess what I'm wondering though is like, okay, so let's say there's Noctis and you can teach him a bunch of different moves.
Of stuff, right?
Can you teach Gladio a bunch of different moves also?
Not as many.
Okay.
Right. He and the other buddies, we'll call them buddies.
Yeah, why not?
Are they each have their own things to learn, but not as many things. I think this is a little bit later here. I want to show off that we were getting to explore this big city that sort of felt like it was an homage to, it almost felt like kind of exploring an old Spanish city or something, like going to...
Do you remember the name of this city?
Gosh, it's probably right in here somewhere, and I don't remember it off the top of my head. Okay. But this is one of the places you go to in like maybe the third chapter of the game, and you go out on this little kind of like this little date. You walk around with this girl, but you also get to see the city, and it's a really cool space. It's kind of...
Is it a date with like your main love interest?
No.
Oh.
So that's what I'm saying. It's kind of throwing a little kink in the whole situation. That it starts out as the idea that you've got this one great love in your life, but you also have this friend here who clearly might be something going on there. We'll see. We'll see how the game develops. You can see there. We're going to look at that more later, but that's my awesome car, the Regalia, which is pretty sweet.
Looks like you customized that a little bit.
Yep, you get to customize your car. And see, this is like this cool little like lookout. But this whole city I thought was pretty impressive. But lest we think that this is too much like new modern stuff, I did want to make sure and remind everybody we got this very cute section with the Chocobo where you go to the Chocobo farm, you give him a hug, and they have this kind of interesting system where you can rent a Chocobo for a certain period of time, because there's this sort of like, there's constantly the day-night thing happening, right?
Right.
So you actually rent the Chocobo access for
like 2 days.
For 2 days, right? And any time during those 2 days, you can just whistle for your Chocobo.
Oh, that's nice.
And then he comes and you go and run around with him. And it's a great way to get around the field if you're not actually out on the highways with your car.
Yeah. I assume at some point late in the game, you've got to get like a permanent Chocobo or something like that.
I think that is likely, but we have no evidence of that. We're just sort of guessing.
Okay.
But it is pretty fun to ride these guys around. They do kind of have a mind of their own a little bit, right? And so, it's like riding a horse.
Yeah.
And so they don't always immediately respond exactly the way you would expect them to. And I don't know, it's kind of interesting. But, you get to hop with them, and they can kind of glide when you go off cliffs. They've gone to great pains, I think, to make the Chocobos just be sort of fun.
Yeah. So I see all your buddies are on those things too. Like
yeah.
So that just makes me... So of all your companions, Chocobo is excluded. Which one is your favorite? Who do you like the best? Out of Prompto, Gladio, or Ignis?
I think like Ignis is maybe my favorite so far.
Okay.
He's the kind of the uptight guy who's like really got your back.
Mm-hmm. He's the one that like cooks for you all the time.
He cooks, and he's also the main driver if you're not driving.
Okay.
Gladiolus is this big kind of pumped up, muscle bound guy, but there seems to be a sort of like thoughtful side to him. He's occasionally in the car, he pulls out his book and just reads his book. And Prompto is just sort of like your annoying, constantly chatty buddy.
Okay.
Some people are going to really like him, but I don't know. We'll see.
Not me.
Yeah, but okay.
Oh, there it goes. Lestalem. Is that the name?
Lestalem. Yes. Okay. There you go. This is I think an important thing to look at to understand whether you might like Final Fantasy 15 or not, which is driving around in the car, not to mention like just walking around through the field, is a big part of the game. You spend a lot of time in this kind of like passive moving through the world state to go between adventures.
So you're going to a destination right now. You can't fast travel. The car is auto driving.
It is. You can, once you get to a certain point in the game, you can start to drive it yourself. But you always have the option to have Ignis auto drive you someplace. So during this time, you're kind of just sitting there like looking at the scenery. It really is playing up, whether you like this or not, it is the road trip vibe, right? That you're going to spend some time just like looking at the world around you. And it is a beautiful world. Final Fantasy 15 looks just amazing.
Putting the top up.
Putting the top up. I think it goes up and then it goes immediately back down a little bit later in this section.
Ah, there you go.
I'm not sure why that happened. Maybe he thought there was going to be rain. I don't know. But I did want to make the point that you do spend a lot of time just kind of like looking at the world. It's not constant action.
One more car question. Did you get a chance to check out all the music on the radio station?
Yeah, you get to buy new music, including music from the old Final Fantasy games.
Buy with in-game money, not real world.
Exactly, yes.
Yeah,
In-game money, I want to listen to the old Final Fantasy VI battle theme. You go buy that and you're good to go, which is pretty neat. And before we finish that, I want to show a couple other things. A few chapters in here. This is probably somewhere in the third chapter or so. I can't remember exactly. Just showing off a little bit more of the battle system that we talked about at the beginning. This is me probably taking on a fight that's a little harder than what I should be going for at the moment. But if you use smart item uses and you change out which weapons you're using correctly, and you do a good job of blocking and parrying, you can actually take on some fights that are a little bit above your normal skill level and be successful. You can see here the allies are you calling in your allies.
You
to do
activated
attacks.
that ability for Gladio there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And there's this whole system of how healing works and either using potions, or if you get knocked down, sometimes your allies can come and pick you up. But it's not easy, to be clear. I mean, this is a pretty complicated battle system.
I just saw you and Gladio team up for an attack there.
There's a lot of depth here. I think even after 10 to 12 hours with the game, I just don't know if I'm going to love the battle system or not. Not because I have particularly bad feelings about it, but more that it's just I don't understand it all yet. When and where to use magic is something of a mystery. How to best take advantage of your characters, your party abilities.
Yeah.
When you should be using which weapons in your arsenal. These are all kind of mysteries to me, which, suggests, if nothing else, that there's a lot of depth.
Yeah. I mean, that might be especially nice for people who, with FF13, thought that the whole paradigm system was maybe a little too simplified.
Right. And here, the last thing we're looking at, this is actually one of the kind of dungeons that you go through as part of the main quest. And I really like these. You're going into these kind of each one of them's a little bit different, but you're going after these special royal arms that you're chasing. And these dungeons are very crafted with interesting encounters that you run into and secrets that you're chasing down and lots of stuff to find. We wanted to kind of just take a look at that quick cross-section, I think, of some of the stuff that we're seeing in the game, just to kind of illustrate that Final Fantasy 15, we still don't really know whether it's going to be the best game ever or not. It's a very, very big, complicated game.
And even after spending 10 or 15 hours with it, it's still, there's still a lot you feel like you don't know about.
I do not feel qualified at this point to make judgments about it, but I do think that I can make the judgment that it is a very deep, complex game with a lot of stuff to do. Whether you're wandering around with the chocobo, or you're going fishing, or you're driving your car around and customizing your vehicle, or you're learning the intricacies of the battle system, there's a lot of stuff to dig into here. Well, that'll be it for now. Thanks for watching. We will have more about Final Fantasy 15 undoubtedly here in the next few weeks as we come up, at long last, on the final release of this game. Thanks for watching.